I wore the key so long the cord had worn a groove into the back of my neck, a pale line under 6 years of stubble and sun. Brass, scarred along one edge, where I'd once dropped it down a maintenance shaft and had to fish it out with a length of wire. It was the only key left on Halyard Station that still did anything. Every other lock had gone electronic, decades before the funding dried up, and the relay was quietly struck from every registry that mattered. Every lock except the one on Bay 4, the last lifeboat bay, which some engineer with more sense than his superiors had wired to open by hand, in case the whole grid ever failed at once. It had. I was the one who still turned the key. 6 years alone teaches you the sound of your own station, the way you learn a person's breathing. I knew which panel groaned when the ring cooled at the start of each cycle, which stretch of corridor lighting buzzed a half-tone flat, which airlock seal whistled faintly for 11 seconds before it caught. I'd stopped counting days somewhere around year 2, and started counting systems instead, how many still answered when I called them, how many had gone quiet and stayed that way. Bay 4's crank mechanism was one of the last things on Halyard that still answered every single time. I kept it oiled the way another man might have kept a photograph dusted. So I knew, before any alarm caught it, that the ship coming in was not debris and was not mine. It was a Calvex appraisal cutter, small and pale gold, the kind that never carries weapons because it never needs to. The Calvex Assay Guild doesn't take things. They catalog them, price them, and wait for someone desperate enough to sign. I'd read about them in the last briefing packet Command ever sent me, back when Command still sent packets. I hadn't expected to meet one. The broker who came aboard introduced himself as Vesic, 3rd appraisal rank, and he looked at my station the way a man looks at a house he's already decided to buy cheap. He didn't look at me at all until he'd finished looking at the dormant platform bolted into the station's spine. 6 years dead, 6 years unarmed, a directed energy relic nobody upstairs had ever bothered to strip out. "You are the sole registered keeper," Vesic said. "Not a question." 6 years, I said. "The activation codes for the platform are worth, to my guild, an extraction contract. A full one, passage home, resettlement stipend, a pension for the remainder of your listed obligation, in exchange for the codes only. We are not interested in the hardware. We are interested in the fact that it still knows how to wake up." I asked him why a trade guild wanted a weapon that couldn't fire. "Because someone else will want it to," he said, and didn't blink, and I understood that was the whole business model in 5 words. I told him I'd think about it. He said I had until his cutter finished its scheduled appraisal window, 4 hours, and went back to walking the spine with a scanner that hummed like a trapped insect. I watched him work for a while, the way you'd watch a man appraise a house you'd grown old inside. He ran the scanner along the platform's dead housing, murmured figures to himself in a clipped administrative dialect, and made small marks on a slate without ever once looking at the long sunlit curve of the observation ring, the dust turning slow gold in the light. The 6 years of my handwriting scratched into a logbook nobody upstairs had asked for in longer than I could remember. None of that had value to him. He was pricing the one thing on Halyard that could still, theoretically, be made to matter to someone else. Everything I actually lived inside was bouquet to him, unlisted, unworth appraising. The lifeboat came in on hour 2. It wasn't on any manifest, it came in low and wrong, venting something pale from a seam along its underside, and it was making for Bay 4, because Bay 4 was the only bay on Halyard whose beacon still answered a hail. I opened the channel out of habit more than hope, and a voice on the other end, cracked with static and fear, told me there were 4 of them aboard, that their own boat's coupling had failed on the crossing, and that they needed a hand-cranked bay because their systems couldn't talk to anything automated anymore. I told them Bay 4 could still be opened by hand. I told them I was the hand. Vesic found me at the airlock control panel 40 minutes later, keying open the outer doors by feel, because the readouts had died with everything else on this station a long time ago. "You're assisting an unregistered vessel," he said, not accusing, just noting it, the way he'd note a crack in a hull he was assessing for resale. "They're not cargo," I said. "I don't need your permission." "No," he agreed. "But I would remind you, the appraisal window is closing, and my offer does not extend past it. If you are occupied with charity when my window closes, the offer lapses. My guild does not make it twice." He said charity the way another man might say theft. I kept working the crank. The lifeboat docked rough, scraping paint down one side of Bay 4's inner wall, and when the hatch finally cycled, I found 4 of them crammed into a compartment built for 2. A man with a burned hand, wrapped in a strip of his own shirt, a woman holding the panel shut behind them, like it might still fail, and a girl, maybe 8 years standard, gripping the older woman's sleeve with both fists, and staring at me like I was the first still thing she'd seen in days. The woman said their names in a rush I didn't catch, and didn't need to. The girl didn't say anything. She just looked past me at the long, sunlit curve of the observation ring behind, gold light pouring through reinforced glass that hadn't been cleaned by station crew in 6 years, dust motes turning slow in it, like the first calm thing she'd seen either. Vesik's voice came over my comm, patient, unhurried, a man reading numbers off a ledger. 2 hours remain on the window keeper. I looked at the 4 of them. I looked at the platform bolted into my spine that I had spent 6 years not thinking about, that a guild wanted to buy the waking up of, so someone further down some chain I'd never see could decide who it woke up for. I thought about home, the way you think about a room you've been locked out of so long, you've started to doubt the furniture. Then I looked at the girl, who was still staring at the light instead of at me, and I understood that Bay 4's beacon wasn't the only thing on this station that still worked by hand. There was one more system I hadn't handed off to anyone yet. I crouched down so I was level with her, and unhooked the cord from around my neck for the first time in 6 years. The leather had gone stiff and pale, where sweat had dried into it 100 times over. The brass had worn smooth on one face, from my thumb running over it in the long hours, when there was nothing else to hold. I folded her fingers around it. "This opens the only door on this station that still listens," I told her. "If anything ever goes quiet again, out here, you turn it left, hard, twice. Someone will hear it." She didn't understand the words, I think, not all of them, but she understood the weight of it in her palm, the way a child understands that a thing given without being asked for is a different thing than a thing sold. Vesik's window lapsed 9 minutes later. I never gave him the codes. I told him the platform's activation sequence had corroded past recovery 6 years ago, which was almost true, and which he had no way to appraise from a scanner reading a dead board. Guild brokers don't gamble on hardware they can't verify. He logged the visit as a null appraisal and lifted off within the hour, pale gold hull shrinking against a black he'd probably already forgotten by the time he cleared the ring. I stayed on halyard. Command never did send another packet. The lifeboat's crew patched their coupling in Bay 4 over 3 days, ate my rations, slept in the observation ring where the sunlight came through strongest, and on the morning they left the girl came and found me at the panel and pressed the key back into my hand, like she understood I still needed it more than she did, out here, alone, with nothing else on this station left to hold. I wear it again now. The groove in my neck is a little deeper, but some nights, when the light comes low and gold across the ring, the way it did that morning, I think about a guild ledger somewhere, with my station marked null, worth nothing, appraised and correctly, for once, wrong.